use your emotions for your benefit. So you go, you know what's going to feel really good is actually completing this. I bet that feeling when I'm done after all this is going to be like the best feeling I've ever had in my life. So you just have to keep thinking that.
This is the Adventure Sports Podcast, where we talk to athletes, adventurers, and business owners from around the world of adventure sports. Whether you're climbing Mount Everest, starting a bike shop, or getting up off your couch to take your kids hiking for the first time, we want you to have the motivation and inspiration you need to chase that next adventure. The Adventure Sports Podcast is brought to you by Camp Crate, the leaders in fully planned self-guided backpacking adventures, as well as backpacking gear rental. You can check them out at campcrate.net. So there's this new backpacking food company called Peak Refuel. And honestly, I gave them a shot for my last backpacking trip. Y'all, it was literally the best backpacking food I've ever had in my life. I was so impressed by them that I wanted to reach out and get a deal for our listeners. So if you keep listening to the episode, I'll tell you how to save 20% off an order with them.
Hey friends, check out powder7.com, new sponsor for the Adventure Sports Podcast. I've worked with these guys for a couple of years, and two of my sons have bought their most recent pairs of skis there. What's cool is that while they do sell new skis, they also sell previously used demo skis. And these demo skis come with demo bindings, so no need to remount anything. And they are sold for less than half of what you would have to pay otherwise. Great deal, great website, great people. Check out powder7.com.
Hello, this is Jordan from Netflix. How may I help you?
Hey, Jordan. I was wondering, could I get 99 subscriptions to Netflix for free and then pay for the 100th? And then everybody, all 100 people could just use it?
No, you cannot.
Why is that?
Because we only give out one free trial per person, per household, actually.
So there's no way that I can pay for one subscription, but like 99 other people use it for free?
No, not that I know of.
All right. Well, thanks anyway.
All right. Well, thanks for calling Netflix, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Jordan. Look, I know we're not as entertaining as Netflix, but even to them, it sounds ridiculous to have a service for absolutely free. And the truth is, 99% of podcast listeners don't support the shows that they love. And just like something on Netflix, you know, we have production costs, we have hosting costs. There's a lot of costs actually associated with this show, and it takes money and time to produce. So in this season of giving, we ask you, would you like to become a supporter of our show? Because we don't support this show for everybody. You know, this show is a niche. Not everyone's going to like listening to adventurers from all over the world. But you guys do. And when you become a patron of the show, you basically get the upper hand in influencing what we talk about, who we talk to, and what you want, because you've shown us that you're a super fan of the show. And that's why we wanted to make it easier for you to support the show. So there is the ability to support the show for $5 a month at patreon.com. But now there's the ability to support the show for $1 a month. Come on. We've got to be worth $1. Not only do you get to influence the show, you get the satisfaction of knowing you're making this thing happen. So join us in making the Adventure Sports Podcast the absolute best show it can be. Thank you. Hey, y'all. Hope you had a good Christmas. Don't be neglecting your family to listen to this. If you are, I'll just tell you what it is. It's part 2 of the Justin Simoni interview. We started part 1 on Monday, Christmas Eve. If you want to hear the beginning of it, listen to that first, then listen to this. So here goes nothing. Well, if you don't mind, you want to just briefly walk us through where all this started for you, and then how it led to this, you know, climax of a crazy adventure, and whatever you're going to do in the future too. So
yeah, I'll try to keep this concise, but I mean, there's so many disciplines that kind of takes a while. So I'll start when I was 12. We had youth services did a rope program, which is it's kind of like how you graduate grade school and become an adult kind of thing. So rope stood for rite of passage experience. It's kind of like a hippie thing. So you do a lot of trust falls into your friends' hands and stuff. But it culminates into this one outing where you go rock climbing. So when I was 12, that was my first taste of rock climbing. They would set up rappels and easy climbs and get the kids on them. So you worked up to trusting yourself to do these what seems like dangerous things. And the same people who ran the rope program also did a climbing club when I was in middle school and high school. So they would take us climbing, sometimes outside and in the winter times inside. And then I moved to Boulder, which is kind of the mecca of rock climbing. And I kind of stopped doing it because I just didn't know how to find partners. And I'm kind of silly that way. Like I'm kind of a loner, lonely kind of person. So I just I didn't know like where to go or where to hang out.
Isn't that interesting? In the mecca, it's just as difficult as anywhere to find a partner.
I guess. I mean, it's more on me where I'm just not very social. I just didn't have the skills to be social. And then a couple of years later, I discovered bikes. I just had graduated through school. I got an art degree, but I was living in a gallery kind of downtown, and the parking was very tight, and the neighborhood wasn't very good. Like it wasn't a great neighborhood, so our cars got broken into constantly. And after a while, I'm like, you know what? This car is not worth having. Like I bought it for like $800. I'm like, I'm just gonna get rid of the car because I bought a bike at the thrift store for like $14. I'm like, it works fine. I'll figure something out. I'll save up my money and get a car that's worth it, kind of thing. And then I just kind of realized I developed a love of and passion for riding bikes. And the longer I rode the bike, the funner it was. So the next year I did my first just bike tour where I started in Vancouver and rode it all the way to Tijuana, down the Pacific
So
coast.
how challenging was that relative to how experienced you were at the time versus like the Tour de 14? Or did that feel just as hard for you?
There was certainly like a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
It's always kind of awkward to ride a bike that has a big load on it, and then like figuring out like, well, you just have to figure out like what your daily kind of rituals are. So you get up, you get breakfast, you ride all day, you get dinner, you find a place to camp. Like it sounds simple, but like if you've never done it before, like there's all these kinds of unknowns. But once you get in your rhythm, like every day is the same. And I realized I love riding the bike. Like I would be riding bikes to things to check them out, but all I wanted to do was ride the bike. So I had a guidebook and like I would do a day, it'd be like 60 miles or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not done. I want to keep riding. So I do like another guidebook day, do like 3 guidebook days in one day and then just be exhausted and just like find a store, put a bunch of food in my body and just like pass out for the next day. So no, I caught on to it pretty quickly. The difference between something like a casual quote unquote bike tour around the Pacific coast and something like the Tour Divide is it's kind of like the Tour Divide's a race. So there's sort of rules you have to do. You have to stay on course. You can't take help. You use a lot less gear. I had books. I had like a mini library with me on the Pacific coast or whatever. So yeah, it's just a little bit more stricter, which gets a little stressful, I think. And you're trying to go as fast as possible. So if you really feel like you don't want to ride a bike, like you're too tired, you kind of still have to, kind of thing. So yeah, so I did the Pacific coast and I did a 2-month trip in Europe. I did another month trip in New Zealand, just trying to do different things. And the New Zealand trip was the first time where I'm like, I'm bringing a backpack with me because there's all these awesome backpacks to do in New Zealand. So that was the first time I like basically took 2 different things and put them together. Yeah. And then, yeah, a couple of years later, I did the Tour Divide, as you mentioned, which is a bike race from Canada to Mexico again, this time in Banff, Alberta, which is right in the Rocky Mountains, to the Mexican border, kind of south of Silver City. And you go over like 32 continental divide passes or something. So that's kind of how it's defined, by going over these passes constantly. So, I mean, that was kind of an eye-opener. I had a lot of fun doing that. I mean, I never owned a mountain bike until that race. Again, like April of that year, the race is in June. I'm like, I should probably buy that mountain bike. I should probably learn mountain biking. I'm like, yeah, but I just came in there with like, wide-eyed naivety. I'm like, how hard could it be?
It's unreal.
So, yeah. So unfortunately that year, what defined that year was the snow, the levels of snowfall from that winter previous.
What year was it?
So, it was either 2010 or 2011. So it was one of those, like, it basically in the springtime, all the snow was melting and flooding everywhere, right? So basically the course was unrideable. And all the coordinators of the race were like, "What are we going to do? You can't go over all these mountain passes. They're socked in with snow. Like, you can't get like a snowmobile through them. Like, there are no tracks." So they're like, "Well, we'll have to go around them." So the course was heavily modified, and kind of missing, the je ne sais quoi of what makes this race, right? The mountain passes. And I go up to, I'm in Banff going, well, the heck with that. I'm like, I'll just walk the passes. If I can't, like, mountain bike over them, I'm like, I'll just walk them. Like, I brought snowshoes.
You brought snowshoes on the Tour Divide?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I guess, well, the year required it, but man, that's crazy. I did it a couple years later and it wasn't even a problem.
Oh, yeah. I was in Banff trying to get people to go with me. I'm like, come on. I'm like, this will be an adventure. And everyone's like, I don't think so. They're like, you know what? I eventually want to get to Mexico and see my family again. I'm like, oh, come on. We'll make it. I was like, what's the worst that can happen? They're like, avalanche and then get eaten by a bear. I was like, okay, that's an option. That could happen, because we're like in Canada. There's grizzly bears everywhere. So, yeah, I eventually got to Colorado after every single pass, and I'm not kidding. From the start of the race to Steamboat Springs was snowed in, and I had to walk each and every one of them on snowshoes.
Oh my gosh.
My bike was destroyed just from being dragged through snow. Like, the bottom bracket was just like, I had to go through like 3 or 4 bottom brackets, 3 or 4 chains just from, it just from the conditions of it being dragged in. It was just incredible. So unfortunately, I was able to then just ride bikes instead of doing this funny mountain bike snowshoe challenge across the country. I was able to ride the bike, and I got to just outside of Silver City, and I managed to go off a berm or something really fast, and I got air and I crashed, tacoed my front wheel, and then I tore my shoulder. And neither the bike nor I could go further without outside assistance. And I just basically had to call it. I forced to call it. So I'd gone through all this adversity. I was the only one that decided to do the actual course instead of the intelligent way of the detours. And yeah, I landed in the emergency room that afternoon, just bummed, the broken or torn shoulder. So I was 100 miles from the end. And I felt it. I was very sad. I really wanted to see this thing through. And it was just a silly mistake on my part of crashing. So the next year, of course, I lined right back up. Snow levels are a bit more normal this time. So no need for the snowshoes. But I also thought there was no need for gears on my bike. I'm like, I should just do this as a single speed.
Jeez.
So, yeah. Long story short, I made it to Mexico that year, so I was pretty happy. Yeah, I realized I could race mountain bikes across the country, and then yeah, what happened? I don't know. Just decided to. You kind of like, okay, so this is what happened. So you've done the Tour Divide?
Yeah, it was 2013 actually.
So I'm not sure if this happened to you, but it sure happened to me, where I'm riding the bike and like I'm going like through all these amazing mountain ranges. And they look beautiful. And I remember, I think it was that like small few hours that you're in Idaho, kind of near that bird conservatory or whatever, well, the wildlife refuge. And I'm looking at the mountains and they look beautiful. And I think to myself, I'm like, it would be cool to stop riding this bike, give my butt a break, and just kind of hike up to the top of the mountain, because I think the view would be awesome. And I kind of got because you get kind of tired riding bikes for 16 hours a day or whatever. I'm like, wow, that'd be a great idea. I'm like, why don't I make that the objective of a trip? So I was like, wow, I mean, Colorado has mountains. I'm like, what would a trip like that look like? Has anyone done the 14ers, say, by bike? Like, how did they do it? How long does it take? I have no idea. Do people do it regularly? Like, I had no idea. So yeah, I kind of just got into hiking, and doing 14ers, but I still didn't own a car, right? So if I wanted to go to these things by myself, I had to push myself on a bike to the trailheads, which is kind of funny. So I kind of would do mini trips. Like, for example, a mini trip for me would be like ride from Denver to Salida, race a race like a like a gravel grinder race, rest the next day, and then hike up a mountain and again go home. And I kind of loved it. I kind of loved all the different things you did. Like I loved the touring aspect, and then I loved the racing aspect, and I loved just the hiking aspect. I'm like, this would be cool to do for like a month plus. Like, wouldn't it be rad to just make this a trip? So yeah, one day I was like, let's go. I'm moving to Boulder, which is like the intersection mecca of mountain, or it's like cycling, trail running, and climbing. I'm like, I'm just going to get good at all three during the winter, and then in the summer, I'm just going to go for it. So yeah, that's basically how it was devised by me. And then I kind of like it. There's so much planning involved to figure out the routes and where you're going to go and how you're going to do it. I also kind of figured I'm like, well, is there a record? I'm like, how fast has this been done? Because like I'm still young and brash, and I think I'm really fast. Like how fast have people done this? So I found out there's a guy in, I think it was 95 or 97, named Roy Benton. And he essentially did it what we would call contemporary self-supported style. He got his own food. He got, he didn't have any outside support. And he did it in 37 days. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. 37 days for 58 mountains. That seems pretty fast.
It's really quick.
Yeah, because all the other times I was doing in my research were more like 60 days, 70 days, I was like, I thought that was pretty good. But I'm like, wow, Roy almost did half the time. I'm like, okay, that's not a soft time by any means. I'm like, okay, good. I'll try beating Mr. Benton. I had no background. All I had was his name, his time, and knowing that he did self-supported. Like, that's all the information I had on this guy. I like did the cursory Google search for Roy Benton and didn't really find anything. So I'm like, well, okay, that's enough to go on, I guess. So I'm like, okay, that's my goal. Beat Mr. Benton. Yeah. So I was like, well, I've got 20 years of technology and beta. I have the internet now. Roy didn't have that. So I do have kind of an advantage. I'm like, I wonder if I can use it to my advantage. So yeah, it was a big learning experience because even though I started hiking 14ers, I didn't do a lot because I had to ride a bike to them or find a ride. So at the beginning, I hadn't done them all. I had done 9 of them, and I had done basically the 9 easiest ones of them, except for Long Speak, which is really close to me. So on the trip, almost 50 of the 14ers was my first time being on top of them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, this is ridiculous. Like, it was really fun because every step was a new experience. But it was also like, am I going the right way so many times?
Yeah. I remember on my first bike trip, we were on the Alaskan highway, my buddy and I, and we were absolutely total idiots. We had no idea what we were doing. We ran out of food a bunch, and it really kind of scarred us because I remember crying one time thinking about key lime pie because we were so hungry, and we were so far from the next spot to get food, and it kind of scarred me. And my wife even makes fun of me now because I tend to way overpack even for day trips, and I don't really have to do that now because, we buy from Peak Refuel, and they have these awesome freeze-dried meals. It's lightweight. It weighs almost nothing when there's no water in it, and it's a lot of food. It tastes awesome. So gone are the days of carrying way too much food, and hello to the days where we're only carrying Peak. If you'd like to give Peak Refuel a try, just go to their website, order some food, and at checkout, just use the code ASP20 at checkout to get 20% off. So give them a shot. No, man, I totally get it. That's about in the same boat. Tour Divide, couple tours. This was a big jump in experience, and I had just moved to Colorado. And I'm not a climber either. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it was a challenge on a few of them for sure, but was not able to. I think I got through about close to 20 before I had to call it, but I would love to get back out there and try it again.
Oh, I hope you get to do it, man. Now that you have an advantage now that you kind of understand what you got to do, what the mindset is, what it's like. Like it's not easy. Like you get beat up. One of the one of the big surprises from the 14er trip was there's just nowhere to rest, right? I had this idea that like, okay, I knew the hiking was going to take a lot out of me because there's a lot of, just the impact from all the hiking and stuff. And I was like, well, I can just recover while riding my bike. That is just the worst idea. That's a fallacy I had made up in my mind because it's almost like there's these hidden peaks you have to do because when you ride the bike, you're not riding flat areas. You're riding up and over passes. And these passes have like the elevation gain that you'd see when you're doing one of the 14ers. So like you just get more and more tired and like, oh my gosh, some of the days, like I would get up and it would take me like 3 hours to like kind of warm up where I felt somewhat alive, where I felt like I'm like, okay, the day's gonna work. We're not just gonna hang out at the coffee shop all day and like, quote unquote charge electronics while like
it's tempting though, man. I know that feeling. God.
Yeah, just French pastries in my mouth and like, do my Instagram work. It's just like, oh my gosh. So yeah, I mean, that was a hard thing to deal with was just the fatigue. It seems obvious like, oh yeah, it's a lot of work. If you're going to be there a while, you're going to get tired, but like the fatigue is the legs aren't moving, and like you have to kind of will them to work. And maybe the Tour Divide taught me the lesson on how to get through that. I'm not sure what happened with you, but I know by the third day of the Tour Divide, when you're looking at 2 more weeks plus, at least more like 3, by the third day, you're just like, I'm really tired and it doesn't make sense to go forward because the legs they just feel like lead bricks. What do I do?
That's so funny you say that. The first 2 days were we were racing. Everyone was racing the first 2 days, like everyone that's in the kind of the middle. And by day 3, we all had slept just in this field. Some were behind this bar. I was in this bank's parking lot in some bushes. And we all wake up and find our way to the same gas station. And everyone's like, yeah,
Dude.
The race is over. We're just trying to finish.
Yeah. Well, what the Tour Divide, like what the Tour Divide taught me was like, once you feel that way, like you could try pushing over and like you can push through the fatigue and there's another side. Like you're not going to feel fresh, but like it's workable. You'll function and you'll just have to get used to kind of always feeling pretty much not the greatest. And it's kind of, I mean, I'm sure the body isn't like, like some sort of emergency mode. I'm quite positive, but like it's workable. Like the problem is like once you're done with the trip, it takes months to recover. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, yeah, I'm like, okay, this is what I signed up for. This incredible amount of low level pain. I'm like, okay, work through it. Look at the sunshine. Look at the sunrise. Like, oh, that's so beautiful. Take a picture.
That's really good advice, really. But so do you find it? You say you're not sociable and you kind of keep to yourself. But I know you are trying to like. Maybe you're not. It's not a heavy pursuit to find like sponsorships or find a following. Do you find that a conflict for yourself?
Yeah, I'm kind of a do-it-yourselfer guy, so it's almost like I'm talking to you. And it's not like I'm not like amiable or social or like I just don't know how to talk to people.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's more like I just grew up, and my parents imbued in me this sense of like you're on your own. If you want something done, you got to do it yourself. Like when we went sailing, even like recreationally, like if we wanted to get to an island, we had to put in the work. like we weren't like allowed to turn on the engine. Like we had to use the wind. And like if we weren't skilled enough to like harness the wind to get this boat to the island, we just weren't getting there. Like, so it's kind of like, I don't know if these lessons were the greatest, but it's what I have to work with. So, I'm not sure, like, sponsorship, like, it's more, the problem that I have is the multidisciplinary part of it, where, you know, it's hard to go to a mountain bike company, right? And go, hey, I'm really into mountain biking. I do these long trips and I do all these other things while doing mountain biking. Because like the mountain bikers are like, well, we just want you to mountain bike. But you're like, well, I do. It's really cool when put these things together and you get this totally new thing. And people are like, I don't really understand it. And I'm like, okay. So you kind of go to like a climbing company. You're like, well, I do all these really cool things on mountains. But they're like, well, like, but we have all these people who do things on mountains, but harder. And you're like, well, I used a mountain bike to get to them. And they're like, we don't really care. Like, it's hard to market that. So it's been kind of a hit and miss to find companies that are like, oh yeah, we're totally into mountain biking. Oh, we're totally into, camping as well. It's like, oh cool, let's work together. Or have companies that want to go into that direction. So like a company that works really well is like La Sportiva, right? Because they make trail running shoes, plus they make climbing shoes. So when I go, hey, I'm gonna run 10 miles to this climb, do the climbing, run 10 miles back, they're like, oh cool, we make the gear for that. Like, let's do cool things together. And you're like, oh, finally, thank you. Or like let's take a company like Surly Bikes, where they're like, they're like basically like, we want you to do cool stuff on our bikes. We want to see cool stuff. So like, if you're riding your bike to a fishing hole, like, that's awesome. That's what we want people to do with our bikes, But I can't go to a company like Trek and be like, okay, here's what I want to do. They're just like, mountains, like mountain biking, they just don't quite understand it. They have a hard time encapsulating that into their marketing, or like, what's the payoff for them to give me a bike? It just wouldn't hit the right demographic for sure.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because it's so incredible. Like, combining those two disciplines, it's almost like two different worlds wrapped up in one for those experiences that when you're physically on them. Because like you said, the bike it's like riding a horse. Then you get off to do something totally different. But it's kind of like music genre crossovers. It's a hard sell.
Yeah, it totally is, and I kind of understand it, but I think the payoff of doing it is so great. Like, even like, I'll do day trips, to Long's Peak. So it's a 40-mile bike ride there. So it's about 3 hours plus, and then you do the hike, a climb, and then 40 miles back. And the hike, a climb itself is around 10 miles. And by the end of the day, I mean, I have housemates. So by the end of the day, I come back, I'm drained completely. And they can just see it in my eyes. They're all wide and wild. They're like, whoa, what did you do today? I'm like, I had the greatest time.
That's so funny.
What I did is like, well, I kind of know you now, so I do believe you. But if I didn't know you, I wouldn't. So yeah, it's just great personal challenge.
So, you got these big trips that take, at least a year of planning for a lot of it. And then, I follow you, and you're always doing something, like, maybe not every single day, but you're always doing some sort of project that's pretty challenging for your average person. Dude, after those really big experiences, do you find it hard to get the motivation to do these like micro adventures on the weekend?
I think it's more like, I'm kind of a seasonal person, to be honest. So summer, I just naturally cannot even sleep. And in winter, I can naturally do nothing but sleep. So I have to kind of maintain my activity levels in different ways. So in the wintertime, I have to force myself to get up and do stuff. And it just works out better that it's more of a training season for me. It's my training phase. And then my big objectives are in the summer, where I feel super alive and super energetic, and I just want to get everything out. So when I come back from, like, say, the highest 100, I was out for 2 months. And kind of thankfully, I guess, I sprained my ankle going down the very last mountain, which was Long Peak.
Are you kidding me?
No, it took that long to get injured, basically.
Oh my God.
5 miles down the trail, like, high on adrenaline and psych, got on my bike, and then the sprained ankle wasn't that big of a deal. And then like, the next day I couldn't really walk because I had this kind of bad sprained ankle. So I was forced downtime, and I just like I literally made camp on the couch and like got my 0 degree sleeping bag and just like kind of slept in it for 3 days straight while my housemates were wondering if I was alive. Um, yeah. And then I don't know, there is like a couple weeks where I just don't feel very good. And like, like there's just levels of, I don't know, like, I'm sure there's levels of um I don't know, like everything's kind of whack in your body basically, where it's just trying to find this kind of balance that it hasn't had for two months, and it just takes a while to like, I don't know, like I lost 15 pounds in that 2 months just doing it. So like I had to like relearn how to eat correctly, like kind of like in the Tour Divide, you just get into eating it out of gas stations and the food is disgusting, right? But like you're like, well, it's only for a couple of weeks, so we can just keep doing this for a couple of weeks. But afterwards, you have to reintroduce yourself to salads, and be like, oh, this is good for me. I like salads, like I can cook my own food. I don't have off of peanut butter burritos. Like, oh, this is so, yeah. And then like, I mean, a lot of that late weight was like muscle, upper body muscle. So like climbing really didn't work. So yeah, there is kind of this like, I don't know, downtime where you have to get back into shape and things like that. And then, I mean, downtime's a great time to daydream for sure. So you just kind of go, well, what's next?
What's next?
Oh, good question. I'm looking at the summer, just because I don't ski. I just have too many expensive outdoor
Yeah,
sports.
me neither. My knees can't handle it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I got too many things I love doing. I cannot worry about. It's almost frustrating how much there is to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, God, I would love to try that, but that's another $5,000 that I'd have to
Yeah, right,
want to
right.
pour my money into. But you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, who could I steal skis from for the
Exactly,
year?
exactly.
So, yeah, I've decided to like kind of pare it down. So I climb, I ride bikes, and I run, and that's plenty for me right now. So I'm looking at the summer. One of the things I kind of mapped out last year was a traverse of the entire Sangre de Cristo range from south to north. So you would start basically at Lake Como Road in the highway, and then go up Little Bear, do the traverse to Blanca, go to Ellingwood, California, and then just keep going north, until you basically get to Salida. It's pretty wild. It's a little over 100 miles. It's all in the ridgeline. You never dip down, and you basically tag about 80 peaks along the way.
Yeah, that's incredible. I definitely that was the one that I started in as well for the 14ers challenge, and that sounds incredible.
Yeah, so it's very cruxy because the Little Bear Blanca traverse is technical. The traverse between Cresto and Peak and Needle is technical, and there's a bunch of mountains you've never heard of that also have these kind of technical or semi-technical ridge lines, right? So it's kind of similar to, say, the Nolan's 14 challenge, where it's 100 miles about, and you basically string together 14 14ers in the Sawatch. Except that these things are way more desolate in the Sangres. They're way more technical. No one ever does it because no one ever has done it, kind of thing. And you're like, wow, this is cool. Since you never drop down into a valley floor, water becomes an issue. Where do you get it? So I kind of have to time it correctly where there's still snow on some of the ridge lines to kind of gather and melt for water, things like that. So hopefully I'm thinking May, early June for something like that. So right before the weather gets just terrible again, because I'll be on the ridge line. There's nowhere to hide. There's electrical storm.
The Adventure Sports Podcast is also brought to you by Powder 7 Ski Shop. Powder 7 is Colorado's premier homegrown and family-owned ski shop. Online at powder7.com, they offer a huge selection of new and used ski gear, plus full tech and boot fitting services at their shop in Golden. With personalized customer service, they set up skiers from all over the world with perfect gear. From brands like Kesley, Rosignol, Black Crows, and Head, Powder 7 is all skiing all the time. So check out powder7.com to learn more. Now, back to the episode. No, I
Funny that
encourage
happens.
people to look at it. I mean, it's a spine, it's a vertebrae of a mountain range. I mean, it is one of the most picturesque mountain ranges I've ever seen, but it's that's all it is. It's a spine of mountains that goes basically cross sections across this valley, and yeah, that would be awesome. And you got a name for it yet? The Simoni Hell on
Oh,
Earth or anything?
no name. Probably just the
Nah.
same or something. Someone there's two individuals that did it last year, which is really cool. And they're two people that one of the persons I really look up to. He's this guy that's won like Western States, or not won it, like he's been like second place in Western States like 3 times. So really, really good runner, basically. And his buddy was the really good climber. So they're like, well, you're good at running, I'm good at climbing. We can work together to get through this thing. I'm going to do it a little differently, though. I'm going to do it totally unsupported. So that means I'm going to bring all my food from the beginning to the end. I'm not going to leave caches along the way. And all I'm going to do is harvest water from the route and just do it alone.
How long do you
And
think it'll take you?
oh, dude, I was like, I think this will take me a week. And the guys last year did it in like 3.5 days. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I feel as if I have to do it similar to their time or no one's going to take me seriously. So basically what I have to do is learn from them, right? I'm pretty good with my climbing abilities. I have to just ramp up my running. I have to basically train like I'm the Western States guy. I have to train as if I'm doing a 100-miler, which is essentially what I'm doing. So yeah, I mean that's in some ways that's easy to do because people know how to train for Western States. So I can just take like a training guide from a coach and make sure my mileage is ramped up the same way, kind of thing. So
Can you explain Western States, because we have listeners like all over the world? They might not know what that is.
Sure. So Western States is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, 100-mile races in the country. It's also one of the most famous and most popular ones. And it was started by this guy who, very similar to my kind of thinking, where the route was basically a horse route, right? So people would try to ride their horses along this 100-mile trail. And this guy's like, I think his name is Gordy. He's like, okay, the horse route's cool. Can I just run it? And people are like, well, I guess if you just stay behind the horses and you want to try to run the race at the same time the horses have, like whatever the time limit is, like 2 days, 3 days or whatever. It's like, go for it. He's like, oh, okay. And this was sort of at the time where people didn't know if you could run 100 miles. So, I mean, like, long story short, he was able to do it. He's like, wow, we should do this every year. So he was basically the race coordinator of what became the Western States. So right now it's extremely competitive race. Like if you're an ultra runner in the United States, you try to get into Western States. It's hard to get into because there's just so many spots and everyone wants to do it. So there's like a lottery system, which just happened last weekend. There's certain races you can try to win and you get like a golden ticket to get into Western States. So kind of big time. Basically, the thing I want to do has only been done by a guy who's really good at the most famous ultra race in the country. So I'm like, oh yeah, I could totally do it too. It's that confidence from naivety, because I've never actually ran 100 miles. I'm pretty sure I could. I just can't tell you what exactly it's like.
And I love your level of stoke, man. Like that's just what it takes. You got to kind of not know what you're getting into to actually do it. Because anyone that had the complete understanding of what the difficulty of the things you do probably just wouldn't do it. So
yeah,
it's a skill. It's definitely a skill. Keep it that way.
Again, yeah, circling back, it's almost like I know I can imagine doing it. So all I have to do is apply my imagination to it, and it's done. Easy as can be.
That is hilarious, man.
So the other thing I was kind of thinking of this summer was like, I'm like, well, if I can get that done in May, I'm like, wow, that's a great fitness test.
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's only a weekend, so you got the rest of the summer.
I only have to take a day off. What the heck? But I'm like, wow, I'm like, if I do a good job, I'm like, maybe I should revisit the Tour 14er. I'm like, it would be really cool. Like the record now is like 32 days or something. So it was 37 in 95 or 97. Now it's 32. I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to bring that down below 30, sub 30 days to do this whole thing? I'm like, that would be really rad. That'd be a cool thing to leave as a legacy kind of thing.
And use the Western states as kind of like, or not, I'm sorry, use the Sangre de Cristo Traverse as like a training ground for it.
Yeah, yeah. It's also like built-in recon because like you do hit 4 14ers while doing this. So I'm like, oh, that's a good long weekend training. But again, I mean, there's no one that has more experience doing this than me, which is crazy to think. So I wouldn't have to go out there and like train. I know how to do everything. I've been to these mountains by bike at least twice, all the mountains. I'm like, wow. I'm like, that's an insane advantage. I'm like, I honestly think I could optimize everything to get it done under 30 days. So I'm like, wow. I'm like, since I work for myself, it's not a question of getting the time off. I just don't work, right? I tell my clients, I'm like, hey, I won't be around in August or whatever. But yeah, I'm like, wow.
They don't need to know why.
Oh, I tell them. They know what I do now.
Yeah,
They're like,
I'm just playing. Oh, I'm busy. Wow, he's got a lot of clients. Okay.
Can't you just give a quick call? No, I'm sorry, I really can't. I don't have a phone on me. So yeah, I'm kind of thinking of it. I just feel like I'm in great shape, and it seems as if I should express this specific type of expertise one last time, just to like, I don't know. I also, when I daydream of trips just like this, like the 14er trip or the highest 100 trip. You know, I just remember how fun it was and like how awesome it was just camping along the road and doing so many hikes, you know, in such a short period of time. I'm like, wow, that is actually my happy space, you know? So
and you're content with keeping it in your backyard, huh?
For the time being, there's other objectives I have that aren't in Colorado. I was considering like, how can I branch out and do something similar yet in a different location? One of the ideas was to start doing sea to summit trips, right? So start at, say, Pacific Ocean, right? Ride the bike to Rainier, do Rainier, and then reverse it. Like that'd be kind of cool too.
Oh, absolutely. There's one to up Kilimanjaro every year that does that.
Yeah, like I would love to do Kilimanjaro that way, but it's almost to the point where like I would prefer to do it that way, instead of just like I would totally do it that way, preferably than just flying into base camp of Kilimanjaro and getting a guide and whatever. So I'm kind of looking on like, well, what could be a great goal for that? And for me, I think it'd be like Denali. Like that seems like logistically kind of up my avenue where like, how do you get yourself by foot to Denali from, you know, the Pacific Ocean or something? Cause like, are you pack rafting? Like, are you skiing? Like, is there a bike involved? Like, how do you do this? Like, I just looked into how to get from like the park boundary to, the base camp of Denali at like 14,000 feet. Like, there's a glacier. Like, it's not easy or safe travel. Like, people must be doing it, but I just don't know how they're doing it. Like with great detail, you know, because like people fly in because there's crevasses in those glaciers and you could die. You know, it's just very dangerous for a lot of people to do it. So what am I not getting? Why are people paying lots of money to being flown in? I don't think it's just convenience. So, yeah, I don't want to go into something so green that I'm a danger to myself, but like, I want to know, is it just because I think part of it might be, it's just, it gives you a greater chance of actually summiting. Like Denali's harder. It takes at least 3 weeks to get to the summit. The weather's terrible, you know, it's a lot of luck. So, we'll see. We'll see. It's always kind of like a budget thing. That's kind of the thing where like, it might be good to see if I can't get, some sort of project together that's just not me on a bike. Like, are we filming a movie? Can I get a major sponsor to help out? What's their payoff? Is it the movie? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
You know, this is, you know, this doesn't have to be on the record or advice, but something that I always wanted with each trip, this is just me, I just felt like more purpose behind something when I did it for a cause. And I know that's really popular, but it had to be something I really, really cared about, like legitimately, and didn't use it as a way to like get funds. But I'd be like, how can I help you guys doing what I'm already good at? Because I really love what you're doing. And I think we could work together to make it, more substantial for everyone. And I don't know. I don't know if you are really passionate about something that's outside of biking that would make the world a better place. But if you could see yourself doing that, I've always found that and when those days that I felt really low and I wanted to quit, I would have a reminder of like, no, I'm doing this for all these people. I've got to keep going. And that always helped me a lot. And you feel so good about, I mean, there's obviously benefits to yourself, but knowing that it's being used for something was just really cool. I loved it.
Oh, totally. That's totally useful and legitimate, and I can commend you for that for sure. Yeah, what I do need is probably a manager, because that's a lot of things to juggle in one air. Because like you have to plan the trip, and then you have to plan like oh my gosh,
there's
like
PR,
I need a full time.
There's
right.
But it almost because I had to do it all for myself, but then there's other trips I just wanted to do just for a personal growth and experience, and it's all depends on what you want, but.
Sure,
you fill it out, and I never let it really search for it. It always kind of came to you, but that always helped. That always helped. But
absolutely, yeah. It's almost like it's a skill I'll have to develop, and I have confidence that I can develop it just because look at all the other skills I've developed. I'm already I'm pretty good at a lot of things. Like I could probably be good at another thing.
Well, you go from commuting on your bicycle just because you had to scaling the 100 highest mountains in Colorado and doing it and half of them on a bicycle, or getting to each of them on a bike. Right. It's crazy to watch your progression. And I'm like, dang, there's just no telling. I mean, it's like a skyrocket, it's like a rocket taking off. He's going to be biking on the moon at some point.
Yeah. I've had many people hold many beers for me.
That's hilarious. Well, it's really cool that it definitely attests to your ability to learn skills and really achieve anything that you want to. You've got discipline, you've got planning skills, and the ability to stick to it. That's half of it right there.
I appreciate it.
Well, cool. Well, Justin, man, thanks for joining us today. I won't keep you, but. This was great, man. Thanks for setting it up on such a short notice.
No problem, man. It's my pleasure, of course.
Cool, man. Well, I've been wanting to talk to you in person for a long time, and now I actually have an excuse, a podcast.
Anytime. If you have any questions on something you think I'm good at, just email me and I'll try to point you in the right direction. I do it semi-regularly for a lot of people. I'm just psyched to see people out there having fun.
Well, dude, thanks so much again.
Cool, Mason. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you soon, hopefully.
All right, have a good one, dude.
Cheers, man.
All right, bye. Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you know somebody that would make a good guest on the show, or if you have a pretty cool story about the outdoors or adventure sports that you want to tell us, please call us and leave a voicemail at 812-MAIL-POD. That is 812-624-5763. You can also send us an email at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. Again, it is always helpful to leave us a review on iTunes. And if you'd like to be a supporter of the show, you can give $5 a month at patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. And links for all that stuff is also in the show notes. So thanks again for listening. And y'all get out there and do something so you can be on the show one day. All right, later. Don't forget, if you want to save 20% off the best backpacking food you're ever going to eat, go to peakrefuel.com and use ASP20 at checkout.